Today we're making Choux Craquelin, and this dish clocks in at 349 calories per portion, 6 grams of proteins, 33 grams of carbs, and 22 grams of fat. To start off, we're going to measure out 100 grams of sugar, 6 egg yolks, and we're going to whisk those together. And we're going to start off by making our filling. And what we want to do is we want to whisk our sugar and our egg yolks until they're nice and creamy and starting to become more white in consistency. So we want to work in a lot of air. And after that we want to measure out 30 grams of cornstarch. We're going to mix that together, and then we're going to add 6 deciliters of milk, roughly 600 grams. We're gonna just mix in our milk, and then we're going to add 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. Then mix that together, and then we're going to heat this on the stove and let it reduce. And I did this the night before because you want this to have time to cool down. So late at night, the day before, we are going to eat these. And this takes quite some time, and it depends on how thick you want your filling to be, but I would recommend going a bit further than I did because they were a bit loose. So go a little thicker, and I think you'll be happy with that. All we need to do then is cover that with plastic wrap and put that in the fridge overnight. And it's 11 at night, so that means that we're gonna come back to this in the morning and make the rest. And another thing we want to leave in the fridge for a while is the other part of our filling, and for that we need roughly 280 grams or 3 deciliters of cream and 30 grams of powdered sugar. We just want to mix those together until we have a nice and stiff whipped cream. However, be careful so you don't go all the way to butter. But we want this to be a bit stiff as well, because we're going to mix that together with our vanilla cream that we did the night before. Once our cream are nice and stiff, we're gonna just fold in our vanilla cream. And this is going to be our stuffing. And once everything is folded in, we're just gonna use a piping bag and take our filling, put it in a bag, and just put that in the fridge and let it cool down a bit. Next up is our cookie thing that we're gonna put on top of our choux pastry, and that's gonna give us our nice cracked look with our dry surface. And this is really easy to make. 65 grams of brown sugar, 65 grams of butter, and 65 grams of flour. And it's easier to make this if your butter is room temperature, so if you take it out a while before you make this, that's easier. Otherwise, just mix that together until you have a nice paste, and once your butter and sugar are mixed together, we can add our flour and incorporate that as well. And what we want to do is that we want to make small cookies out of these. And if it doesn't come together, just use your hands and make it form a nice even dough. And we're gonna put that on a baking paper. And then we're gonna take another piece of baking paper and just use a rolling pin and flatten that out. And here you can help shape it, so if it doesn't become the shape that you want, you can just remove some pieces and put them where you want. And what we want to do is we want to form 12 pieces of our frozen cookie here. So fairly square or a fairly rectangle thing is what we're going for. And the thing is here, we want our choux pastry to be a bit smaller than our frozen cookie, because we're going to put that on top. We want the edges of that to fold over the choux pastry. So I'm using a roughly 2-inch, 5 centimeters small mold for the choux pastry. And then we're using 6.5 centimeters or maybe 2.5 inches for the cookie dough thing. So all we need to do then is just put that on a baking tray and use our big ring mold here and form 12 of these cookie shapes. And things doesn't always work out. So when I got to the last one, there wasn't enough space for that. So I had to do some trimming. But good thing is it's quite easy to fix. I stole my kid's rolling pin because it was easier to use a small one here. And then we're ready for our final one. And once we have cut our holes, all we need to do is just put that in the freezer. And it's a good idea to see that it fits before you put it in the freezer. Mine did not, so I had some trouble again. And it didn't really fit in that either. One of them was bent, but at that point I was too tired to try to fix it. So it was good enough. And that one that was bent, that's gonna show up later when we put this in the oven. So if you want to make sure that they look even and everyone's look the same without any dents or anything, you should be careful that they're flat and even and not broken. So for our choux pastry, 90 grams of flour, 2.5 grams of salt and 2.5 grams of sugar. We're also going to use 180 grams of eggs. I got to 178, that was close enough for me. And we're going to add 70 grams of butter. And finally, we're going to go for half milk, half water, so 80 grams of milk and 80 grams of water. We're going to mix all of that together in a pot, so just add everything. We're going to heat that up until the butter has melted, and once everything's melted and your liquid starts boiling, then it's time to add your flour as well. And that means that we can lower our heat, add our flour and stir this. And we want to keep stirring this until everything stops sticking to the bottom. At first we're going to get a paste that's going to be sticking to the bottom, but eventually that will stop. So we just want to keep stirring until everything comes together and it doesn't stick at all to the bottom of the pot. It doesn't take that long, but here it is. And I have a low heat on, and right now this is roughly at 74 degrees, and as you can see it doesn't stick to the bottom at all. And we haven't added our eggs yet, and if we do now we run the risk of the eggs cooking. So we're gonna put these in a blender and mix it a bit and just get some air into that and let it cool down a bit. And we want it a bit below 60, otherwise the eggs might cook. And once we're there, we can add our eggs. Add your eggs and keep it on. Then our choux pastry is done. So, similar to our step before, we're gonna take a piping bag. And we want this to cool down a bit as well. If you want everything at the top, you can use a bench scraper and just run everything towards the top. And then you can cut a hole if you don't want to use a clamp like we did earlier, and just tie this together. So let that cool down for a bit as well. but we're almost there. We're gonna put our oven at 175 degrees. And then we're gonna take a baking paper, and if you have white baking paper, that's much better. I didn't. I thought I did, but I did not. So I used a pencil to trace out the size of our choux pastry dots, and those pencil markings showed up at the bottom of our choux pastry later on, because they're gonna expand and they're gonna bring some of that pencil markings with them. So it's better to use the white ones, flip it over, then it will be somewhat see-through, so you can just make sure that none of your pencil markings will end up on the bottom of your cookies. And just try to make sure that they're roughly the same size. This has been in the fridge for roughly 1 hour. That means that we're ready for baking them. So just remove the excess of the sugar and then simply take one of them, try to put them as much in the middle as possible and give it a light push. They're gonna be in the oven for roughly half an hour. And here they are. And I think most of them turned out great. There you could see the one that was not so great. But what we want to do is we want to use a spoon to put a crack in our oven in order to reduce the heat, because we're going to dry this in the hot oven later on. And you can see the pencil markings here as well. And finally we want to use a knife just to cut a hole in. That will allow some of the moisture to escape. It will make it easier to put our filling later on, and we're going to dry them up inside a bit as well. So back in the oven they go, and I like to use a wooden spoon just to keep a crack in there so it doesn't get too hot. And all we need to do is take our filling, just stuff them as much as possible. You can shake them a bit if your filling doesn't fully go down to the bottom. And this is the result. As I said in the beginning, the filling could have been a little less loose and less runny, but I think they turned out great. They taste great. If you haven't tried them, I suggest you do. And that's it. So, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy.